Hello, my beautiful souls. This is Tenebrous Gate, and it's been a long time coming. I've been playing with the idea of coming back. I originally wasn't going to. By the way, I'm 10, and obviously that's not my real name, but for the most part, it's a name that I feel like reflects a really vital part of who I see myself as someone who's constantly exploring and seeking completion in her own self. Because oftentimes we think okay, I'm finally gonna be done, and we're never really actually done. And yes, you can hear that in the background, but this is the only time. Sometimes I have time to do it at home, but I never seem to have quite enough time as a mother. Things they do tell you stuff. They really do tell you stuff, but they don't really. I think you just never believe it, kind of thing. But so we always are seeking completion. I think we're always trying to find things that are done. Like, I'm done. No, 10 is this continuous process of completion. We're never done. We're never done baking. Like, if you put something in the oven, right? You know it's going to be done. Like, the brownies are going to be done. Whether good or bad, they're going to be done. But with anything in terms of the number 10, if you look at, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, it goes all the way to 100. And then it transforms further beyond that. Because in the beginning of 100 is 1 and 0, 10. But that's 10 tens. In order to get to that level of completion, you had to go through this process 10 times. So I feel like, I like that number for a lot of many great reasons. And because I'm never going to be done. Whether I like it or not, whether you like it or not, we're never going to be done. But there's something beautiful about that. It's that one consistent thing in this world. And we're going to talk about consistency to some degree in terms of the finite aspect of spirituality. That it's not really finite actually, but in terms of the difference between religion and spirituality, I feel like this is such an important concept for, I wouldn't say beginner level, I say intermediate to advanced. And if you're still in the very beginning of your journey, you can still listen to this. I think that this actually might help you even more so, because you're going to be ahead of the game. So let's look at the difference between religion and spirituality. What is so very different about these two concepts? I want you to think about it. Allow some free flow to occur within you. And it's okay if free flow doesn't occur. All right. What has flowed for you? You can pause this if you need more time. Okay. So I'm going to give you my perspective on it, and my personal experiences are included in this. I'm not an LMHC, doctor, financial, legal advisor. All choices are your own. This is not designed to fix you, by the way, but to help kind of promote thought. So I grew up actually in the Christian religion. I was raised kind of ish Christian. My parents were not I wouldn't say they were very strict about it, but they weren't really not strict about it. It was a really weird fine dance of it all. But the church I was in was kind of very similar, but I think they also too were uncomfortable with things outside of Christianity at the same time. It was a really odd acceptance with also too, they were a lot more accepting than most were at that time period. To believe it or not, they were they were progressive in their belief systems for the 80s, 90s, 2000s. And but in terms of my personal beliefs of religion is that it tends to be more, it does tend to be more rigid. Doesn't mean it always is, but there's always this, like, you follow one being and set of rules and belief systems for the rest of your life. For the rest of your life. And tends to be a lot of like ritual involved in it. Like we do things in a certain way forever, mostly. You know, and when I say, like, I feel like there's always some flexibility with this whole thing with religion, because not all religions are very rigid. Some are a lot more flexible than others, but very often they're predictable. They are, aren't they? Like you like, say for instance, you have your favorite food. You eat chicken pot pies all the time. You buy the same brand over and over and over again. You know, if you're autistic, you kind of know what I'm trying to say. You know what to predict from your food. You're like, okay, if I eat this food, but then if they change the recipe, you know immediately that it's been changed, and you don't like it. You're like, nah, no, you did not mess with my flavor, man. You did not mess with the food. I mean, they don't mess with the food for the most part. And then spirituality is more flexible for the most part. That doesn't mean that's always the case, though, right? It's less static. You have a lot of options you can go with. You can make up your own rules, your own rituals. You can make them up. Like, you can make shit up for yourself. It's more it's personable. It's based on you versus a whole entire group, right? Yeah. And this is kind of interesting too, because a lot of times we often assume that if you're pagan, you're spiritual. And I'm going to challenge you a little bit on this, but that's actually not really true. And you feel free to disagree with me if you want. But a lot has changed since I was growing up. When I was growing up, there wasn't that many pagans. A lot of us, we had to figure out as we went along without the internet. I know, crazy, right? But, like, think about that. So it had no choice but to be personable. We didn't have covens to go to, and there's still not a lot of access to covens sometimes. But even within a specific person, it can now sometimes fall into the realm of religion, because of the fact that sometimes we as human beings like things in a certain way to happen at a specific time, to taste and feel a certain way. And sometimes we're with the same gods for a whole lifetime. Doesn't that sound closely to a religion? If you're doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, you might do it a little slightly different, but you have basically turned something into an art, into a science. You have been like, you know what? The color red means this. Green means this. The moon means this. This is my goddess for the rest of my life. That's religion. It might be a little bit more flexible. It might be a little bit more accepting than most religions, like the one I grew up in, but it's still a religion. You know, sometimes some spiritualities can be a little bit more rigid and inflexible, but there are a lot more options. There's a lot more exploration going on, right? You know, I mean, just giving out an example. But, I'm sorry, guys, I'm going to do this. Don't shoot the messenger. I love you all. I have a lot of respect for a lot of different groups. But there are some people that act like they have a religion. And they get very upset when someone doesn't believe what they believe. They get very upset if people believe in Loki, for instance. And they say, well, he was the betrayer, guys. And they're like, yeah, you know who I'm talking about, right? Some heathens are very rigid, very static. It's not all of them. Some of you guys have a really great spirituality thing going on, right? But they're like, no, Loki is a devil. Wait. Doesn't Christianity do that too? They were very specific on who was the devil, man. I'm agreed to remember this is just opinion. I'm not trying to piss off anyone else out there. But think about it. Doesn't that sound like a religion to you? Very static, very rigid. This is my belief. What I say goes, man. It stays the same, man. I'm not going to have a conversation about this. He was the bad guy. Oh, okay. Sometimes, honestly, with spirituality, the thing that I think that a lot of people confuse about spirituality is that spirituality is something other than Christianity. And that's not true, actually. Spirituality is flexible. Sometimes it's open-minded. Flexibility is more often than not, it's a constant flow of shifting and exploration and change. It's if you look at I think that how you phrase this is agnostics, Gnostics, they would definitely be more likely. They're definitely more often than not in the realm of spirituality because they're constantly exploring. They're trying to connect to this divine source and listen to divine messages. If I'm correct, I could be wrong. I don't know enough about agnostics. I've been exploring it recently, trying to ask myself questions. Am I agnostic? Because I'm always constantly asking questions. I'm always constantly exploring. I'm always trying to understand things differently. And I feel like, in my personal opinion, spirituality is the opposite of static. If you're static, you're not spiritual. And that can be really deeply hurtful for some people, and that's not my intention. My intention is to challenge you to ask questions. Because I feel like if you want to be a deeply spiritual person, you have to be uncomfortable with the unknown. If you want to be a spiritual person, you have to say, you know what, I may have been wrong there. You're right, maybe Loki isn't such a bad guy. Or I feel uncomfortable with the concept that you follow the deity Loki, which actually I like Loki, by the way. I really love Loki. Actually like Odin. Only started liking Odin though recently, in the past year, because as someone who had to ask her questions of herself, I had to think why am I so anti-Odin? This makes no sense. Aren't I be just like the other guys where Odin's the bad guy, Loki's the bad guy too? I just felt a lot of infighting bullshit, and I was like, you know what? Let's have a conversation with Odin. Let's chat a little bit with him. Let's chat with Thor. Come on, let's actually let's end the war, for me at least, right? And I actually now have a better working relationship spiritually with them. I do actually go to them for help a little bit more frequently. I actually do have spiritual dialogues with them where they do help me with really important shit now, because I don't like being static. Number 10, I like to constantly transform. I like to hit a completion. I like to go beyond that completion and go to 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 200, right? So the question I want you to ask yourself, are you actually religious or spiritual? And how can you be more spiritual in your life? How can you be more explorative? How can you be more curious? How can you be more open-minded? And how can you be more open-minded with your lack of open-mindedness? Sometimes it's okay to be you know what? I feel very uncomfortable with that. I'm not really into that. I'm just not ready to dive in that. And you don't have to. And because also too, in terms of exploring agnosticisms, whatever, I've been exploring Taoism, and there's this emphasis on not forcing things. I feel like, if you're going to be spiritual, you can't force things anyways, right? You shouldn't. If you're going to force things, you're being a big meanie to yourself, I think you should just chill. Don't force it. Don't force anything. Take a deep breath. allow things to happen naturally. Because have you ever seen people who have been forced to do something like therapy or learning how to learn an important skill? What usually often happens, they don't want to do the thing even more. So when I'm conveying these concepts to you, I don't want you to force it on yourself. If it doesn't resonate, just drop it, right? Because if you're forcing this on yourself, you're not going to be like, you're going to be less mindful. You're going to be less open. You're going to be less accepting, open-minded, less curious. Don't force curiosity. Allow curiosity to occur naturally. And praise yourself when you are curious, right? Celebrate yourself when you hit a milestone of fabulousness, right? Okay, so I'm going to kind of shift the conversation just a little bit because I don't want these dialogues oftentimes too long, because I feel like if you go a little too far in, it becomes jarble. It becomes a monologue. And honestly, do you really think that, like, I'm not here to lecture you. I'm not here to be on a pulpit and say, follow me, or you shall face the wrath of God. No, absolutely and utterly not. But what I might actually do is kind of like introduce myself. I know, right? We just had this conversation, but I like to just dive in and say hello afterwards. I'm really bad with, actually, I teach myself social skills. Like, I'm like, oh, I forgot to say hello to you. Hi. So again, like, I gave you a quick introduction in the beginning, but I have been on this channel for a while. If you see, you'll look at some of my old stuff. I've shifted a lot. I went from like trying to be really consistent, and I couldn't maintain that consistency. So you're not going to see any of that ever. You're going to be like, oh, hi, hello. You're going to see things that seem less spiritual, where I explored some concepts. I think I'm just going to let myself be, because I'm a 10, right? I'm a 10 out of 10, man. You know what I mean? I should be just naturally who I am. And I've gotten to the point where, I would love to be like all the other YouTubers. I would love to be shiny and glittery and fantastic, but I have a speech impediment. I have ADHD. I might have autism. I'm a mother. But also, too, I will say things that might offend you. I'm not going to do it on purpose. But I feel like that should be always the disclaimer in these videos, is if you have nothing to say that's nice, that is not constructive, I would take a deep breath. I would honestly take a deep breath, because that is a very important skill to have, that we all are continuously relearning, even when we're 37. But yeah, I feel like I should wrap up. You're going to hear this a lot, where I'm like, I don't want to say goodbye. I hate transitions. I don't want to go. But I want you to know that I have no services. This is all free. I have no intention of creating a business out of this. I have no intention of doing anything but having fun with the dialogue. A lot of the stuff that's going to come out of my mouth is coming out from years of exploration, of discovery, of making mistakes, of understanding myself better in a different way, of real serious ebbs and flows, dips, and better feeling states. I'm a real human being with real feelings. I'm a real human being who used to be very different. And if I could go backwards in time and talk to the previous self of who I used to be, I probably wouldn't say anything, because I knew that forcing my knowledge on that person was a big no-no. I wouldn't have listened to this version of me, you know? So like I've kind of like, you know, I've become this person now that kind of like, you know what? Been there, done that. And I love you. Love and light. Very neat. Blessed be. I'm into good health. And to lose these.